Hi, I'm Ernabelle DeMillo. Welcome to Asian American Life. We're here in New York's historic Chinatown. Did you know that Chinatown was formed right here on this street? Back in 1870, many immigrants flocked here because of racism out west. And then in the 1880s, the population grew even more because of the Chinese Exclusion Act. For many years, the community flourished. That is until now. Many Chinatowns like this are slowly disappearing. We'll have a special report coming up. If you want more information on our show, you can like our Facebook page at Asian American Life. Now, let's take a look at what's ahead. U.S. Chinatowns, Paul Lin looks at why some are booming while others are fading. Get out the vote. Kyung Yoon reports on Asian American voters. Minnie Roh sits with Phantom of the Opera's rising star. And A League of His Own, my exclusive interview with legendary New York Mets baseball player Ron Darling. This and more on Asian American Life. Chinatowns were once considered the oldest and largest ethnic communities, but they're slowly disappearing. So what is the future of Chinatowns? We have a special report.
I'm Paul Lin. Chinatowns across the country have been around for more than 150 years. With such history, you may believe they'll always be here, but these neighborhoods are changing, putting pressure on immigrants and families. Walk down the oldest streets in New York's Chinatown, and you're immersed in the people, the markets spilling out to the sidewalk, the colorful shop signs. It's been like this for decades, as we hear from noted Chinatown scholar Peter Kwong. So, Peter, this is one of the oldest parts of New York's Chinatown.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about the history here.
When Chinatown first began, it's basically here. Pell Street, Bayard, and Mott Street. The population in Chinatown was never that big. Until the 1960s, it never exceeds 12,000, but it's really densely packed.
Even more so today, with a population topping 100,000. Here, immigrants who may only speak Chinese can track down affordable housing and a job and learn how to access social services. It's strength in numbers with networks over a century old. The story of Chinatowns dates to the earliest Chinese immigrants who came to San Francisco in 1848. Then came the gold rush and the build-out of the Transcontinental Railroad. Chinese in the western U.S. sought community and established what became the first Chinatowns. By the late 1800s, Chinese faced many racist attacks, yet they got little support from the legal system. Then came the Exclusion Act of 1882, effectively ending Chinese immigration for almost a century.
There was tremendous hostility toward the Chinese who were remaining in the United States. There were attacks against them, there were massacres and all that kind of stuff. So what happened was the Chinese began to escape from these smaller, isolated areas and end up in big cities.
Chinese traveling from coast to coast settled in cities like Chicago, which has a very strong Chinatown today. They also went to Boston and Philadelphia. And here in New York, Chinese arrived, as did other immigrants, in Lower Manhattan.
They all concentrated in this area because this is the poorest, this is the most accessible, the integrated area. And the Chinatown, this Chinatown really grew after the Exclusion Act.
Chinese carved out Chinatowns from once undesirable parts of cities. Today, they're prime real estate. And while populations here may grow, the Asian demographic in many cases has declined.
You can see that particularly in Boston's Chinatown, where in the 1990s the Asians made up about 70% of the neighborhood, and now they make up less than half.
And in Manhattan, more of Chinatown's residents are graying. Meanwhile, the number of family households has decreased by almost 10 percentage points, even as young professionals increased by the same magnitude. Experts say gentrification drives the demographic changes. Real estate development pushing up rents in Chinatown, displacing immigrants and working families from San Francisco and L.A. to the nation's capital. The Welcome Gate in Washington, D.C. is about all that's left of its Chinatown.
A few hundred residents are left in Washington, D.C.'s Chinatown, in large part because many of them live in this one subsidized housing building. Residents need to be bussed out to the suburbs in order to buy Asian groceries.
What's left in D.C.'s Chinatown has the feel of an ethnic theme park. Big box stores dominate, catering less to any resident left who can read signs in Chinese, and more to visitors attending events at the Verizon Center and new residents. Textbook gentrification.
Wealthy people might move in, so maybe housing prices will increase. But they also want higher price stores, even coffee shops or restaurants, different kinds of goods, which means that the lower income people in that neighborhood can't afford to buy the things that they want.
New York's Chinatown bears less audacious signs of gentrification, partly because so many small businesses and restaurants are thriving because of their customers, Asian immigrants and families. As for the residential side, rent control has helped, though it's hardly a guarantee for residents who face landlord harassment and eviction.
Many of these residents are being kicked out by landlords in favor of young professionals who are willing to pay much higher rents, and they're being kicked out illegally.
When we want it! No!
Chinatown leaders have had to choose sides on how they see the neighborhood changing. On one side, many landlords and business leaders support zoning amendments to allow high-rises. On the other side, advocates who believe it will end Chinatown as we know it.
This is the crux of the matter. Many of us in the community resisting that. If you allow high-rises built without restrictions, then this area will be gone.
Consider how monthly rent in Boston has soared when a new high-rise comes into Chinatown. A studio apartment can easily be several $1,000s, 10 times more rent than low-income residents now pay. While inclusionary zoning requires developers to build a percentage of affordable housing units, critics say it doesn't really work.
They are not for poor people. You're eligible from income around $50,000 to $140,000, right? The mean income in Manhattan, China is on 38. So even if you make these things available, Chinatown population cannot afford it.
Putting aside for a moment the intrigue of real estate development and rising rents, some Chinese are simply leaving traditional Chinatowns for new enclaves.
In New York, you have Sunset Park and Flushing, and to a lesser extent, but increasingly so, Bensonhurst. In Boston, you have Quincy and Malden. And these are all places where some new immigrants go.
They moved out to different neighborhoods, to Queens, to Brooklyn, even to the suburbs, in Connecticut or New Jersey. But they come back to Chinatown for dim sum.
Urban scholars might see the changes in Chinatowns as a kind of ethnic succession when a neighborhood's predominant ethnicity changes. In New York, a city of immigrants, ethnic succession happens all the time, but it's hardly an organic process when development paves the way for change in Chinatowns. Peter Kwong says Chinatowns, especially Manhattans, need to be saved since they remain so relevant to newly arriving immigrants, as they have been for over 100 years.
First of all, you need to have very strict laws to protect them against harassment, against forced displacement. That's minimal.
Really, the most important thing to remember in establishing city policies is to make sure that the community has control over many of the decisions, has significant input.
So the fight for America's Chinatowns goes on, with no telling what remains after the dust of development settles. I'm Paul Lin for Asian American Life.
It's hard to believe that it's been 30 years since the Mets won the 1986 World Series. We caught up with Ron Darling, who was the starting pitcher for Game 7. The Mets may have won it all that night, but for Darling, it was a different story.
Got him!
It was a moment in time, one Mets fans and the team will always remember, from the last pitch to the parade through the Canyon of Heroes. But Ron Darling, the starting pitcher that night, remembers it differently. He didn't pitch well that night, and now 30 years later, he's written a book about it.
And really what the book is about, what I tried to explain is that when presented with your greatest moment, a lot of people have these visions in their mind that it's going to go a certain way, you know, when you have that chance. What if it doesn't go that way? So it kind of stuck in my insides for a long, long time. 7th game of the World Series. I didn't pitch that well. The Mets won, so it didn't matter. But 30 years later, I was like, boy, why didn't I pitch better? So instead of seeing someone for $150 an hour, I said, I'll have a cathartic experience and write a book. And that's what it's about, is that, you know, there's so many athletes that write books about success, but there's got to be someone on the other side, and I was that day.
The book, Game 7, 1986, Failure and Triumph in the Biggest Game of My Life, is a New York Times bestseller. It's a behind-the-scenes look inside one of baseball's most memorable teams. The book has made headlines, and not just for Darling's revelations about grappling with his own demons, but his recounting of the team's reliance on drugs and alcohol. So why did he reveal all?
I hear all the time from older players that, boy, these guys today, they took steroids 10 years ago. You know, we would never do that. And I just wanted to set this record straight that baseball has a long history of players trying to get around the system, including my generation of players.
Were some people upset that you revealed that?
I think they're upset, yeah. And I, you know, I thought long and hard. There's 300 pages in this book. Those pages are about 3 or 4 of the pages. And I thought long and hard about not putting it in, but I thought that, you know, I'm putting my own scars, so I put all the scars out there.
Darling, whose mom is Hawaiian Chinese, didn't set out to be a professional baseball player like most kids. He was born in Hawaii and raised in Massachusetts. Baseball was a way to pay for college, specifically Yale.
My household, neither of my parents went to high school, so in my house, really it was school first. So I won a world championship with the Mets in '86, but when I got into Yale, my mom cried for 3 days. So that's the kind of house I grew up in. So I didn't always want to be a baseball player, but I always feel like baseball finds you. You don't find it, and it found me. And I thought I was going to play for a couple of years, use the money to go to graduate school, and then 16 years later, I was still playing.
So the Yale grad found his calling as an all-star baseball pitcher, winning the World Series in 1986, the Gold Glove Award in '89, and gracing the cover of Sports Illustrated. After retiring in 1995, he found himself back in baseball as an analyst.
After I retired, like most players, you're not very good, so you want to get away from the game as much as you can. And then if you're lucky enough to come back, whether you're a coach or manager or broadcaster, you realize how much you love the game and love being around it. So, I mean, the bottom line is I watch baseball games and someone pays me for it. I don't know how I got this gig, but I'm really happy about it.
And successful. He recently won an Emmy for Best Sports Analyst. Adding to his resume, Darling is committed to giving back. He created the Ron Darling Foundation, dedicated to helping find a cure for diabetes after his own son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 11. Darling was recently honored at the Ronald McDonald House Charities Asia Scholarship Program. And it hit close to home for Darling, who relied on scholarships to get him through college.
I got one when I was in high school many moons ago, and would not have been able to go to Yale if I had not gotten that scholarship. So to be able to come and get an award is amazing, but to somehow maybe give back a little bit and help others, I think is a cool thing.
And we think it's cool too. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo for Asian American Life.
Asian Americans are the fastest growing ethnic group in the United States, according to the latest census data. And this has implications for a community's growing influence to shape the political landscape in the country.
Presidential elections are, always times when everybody is, quite focused on at least one level of politics.
James Hong leads APA Voice, a pan-Asian coalition of nonprofits across New York City dedicated to increasing civic participation in the Asian American community.
We are focused on voter turnout through things like door knocking, phone banking, putting literature out there, and registering voters. We're just constantly pushing voter turnout, not just showing up at the polls, but understanding the issues.
Participation is key for a community that has often been sidelined in American history and targets of discrimination, from the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, when Congress passed a law restricting immigration of an entire race of people, to the forced internment of American citizens of Japanese descent during World War II. More recent examples include racial profiling of Chinese-American scientist Wen-Ho Lee, who was falsely accused in 1992 by the U.S. government of selling nuclear secrets to China, and the campaign finance scandal of 1996, when President Bill Clinton's campaign received a number of contributions from Asian foreign interests, which cast a cloud of suspicion on legitimate Asian-American donors.
As a result of the application of the perpetual foreigner stereotype, I think large numbers of Asian American political activists who were being involved through this means of campaign contributions wound up being shut out of the political system.
Add to that a community that has large numbers of foreign-born, and there are even more hurdles to full participation.
First, if you're eligible, you need to naturalize to acquire your citizenship. Second, if you're a citizen, then you need to register to vote. And then the third piece, you've got to turn out to vote.
Asian American Pacific Islanders have a rich history and have contributed to the success of our country.
More and more Asian Americans are registering, and media stars like George Takei and John Cho are lending their celebrity to help get out the vote.
We are the fastest growing group in the country and have the power to chart a new course for our nation.
Register and vote.
Register and vote.
Nationally, the Asian American and Pacific Islander electorate is projected to double from 5.9 million eligible voters in 2015 to 12.2 million eligible voters in 2040. And according to APIA Vote, the last 3 presidential cycles saw more than 600,000 new AAPI voters enter the electorate. What's also significant is how the Asian American and Pacific Islander vote has been trending away from the GOP to the Democratic Party.
I think the likely outcome of the Asian American vote in 2016 will also be very heavily Democratic. And so that's a very significant transformation of the Asian American vote over a 24 year time period.
And the top issue that Asian Americans care about is no different from any other group of Americans: the economy and jobs, affordable health care, quality education, and immigration reform.
This year, when we are going out and talking to our community, the anti-immigrant rhetoric is not lost on Asian Americans. There's talk about foreigners, there's xenophobia. They understand this, and that is one of the themes that keeps coming out as we talk to voters.
The metaphor of this election may be walls or bridges. Are we stronger together or stronger apart?
In perhaps the strongest evidence to date that politicians are paying attention to the Asian American electorate, in August, former President Bill Clinton addressed thousands of AAPI community members at a presidential election forum held in Las Vegas.
You want a president like Hillary who sees you as part and parcel of the American quilt of diversity. She favors immigration reform because there are too many families that still worry every single day about whether they're going to be broken up.
The historic event was organized by the national nonpartisan organization APIA Vote, together with the Asian American Journalists Association. It brought together, for the first time, candidates and representatives from all 4 leading presidential campaigns.
I'm impressed about Mr. Trump's vision for the economy. He will rein in federal regulators who put more and more burdens on Asian Pacific American small business owners.
The presidential town hall, that was an incredible achievement. The fact that the Clinton campaign sent Bill Clinton, that really says something.
It is a really important step in the continuing evolution of AAPI as a segment of the electorate that parties and candidates have to take seriously and have to recognize as an important component of American democratic politics.
The history of Asian Americans in this country is filled with stories of a community that's been largely invisible and ignored. Now, with growing numbers, voice, and representation, the hope is that Asian American communities can move from being marginalized to being the margin of victory. I'm Kyung Yoon for Asian American Life.
I'm Minnie Roh. The Phantom of the Opera is the quintessential Broadway experience. No trip to New York City would be complete without a visit to the Majestic Theater. It is the longest-running musical on Broadway, yet this beloved show continues to break new ground by casting an Asian American as the female lead in a role traditionally dominated by Caucasians.
The love story about the Phantom of the Opera and his protege, Christine Daae, has been captivating theatergoers for the past 28 years. During its record-breaking run on Broadway, there have been 18 Christines, and all of them have been Caucasian. Until now, Ali Ewoldt is Broadway's newest Christine Daae, a Filipino-American actress.
I'm Minnie. Ali. Thank you for coming. Absolutely.
We met Ewoldt at the famed Sardi's restaurant in New York City's Times Square before her curtain call. In no way does her delicate appearance and soft-spoken demeanor prepare you for her incredible vocal range. What does the role of Christine mean to you?
This role is really a dream role. I grew up really wanting to play Christine someday. I saw the show for the first time when I was 10 and really fell in love with the character.
This is Ewoldt when she was 11, singing Think of Me from the Phantom of the Opera soundtrack. You could say she has been preparing for her role as Christine her entire life. Even at that young age, her enormous talent is unmistakable, and it was apparent that a star was born. Born to a Filipino mother and a Caucasian father, Ewoldt grew up in Westchester County, outside New York City. She began dancing at 3, taking voice lessons when she was 10, and performing in musicals throughout middle school and high school. It's safe to say musical theater has always been her passion.
I loved it very much. I grew up close to New York City, and so I was able to come in and see Broadway shows a lot, which was definitely very inspiring. And musical theater happened to be a huge part of my public high school. It was a very small public high school.
Yet, despite her obvious gift of voice, Ewoldt decided she needed, quote, something to fall back on in case show business didn't work out. So she focused on her academics, graduating as valedictorian of her high school, and then pursued a degree in psychology at Yale University. But it was at Yale that her destiny as an actress was sealed.
I was performing with the graduate school with Yale Opera program. They needed an extra soprano for their production of The Marriage of Figaro. So I had a short little song, but a friend of a friend happened to come to watch the production, and she was a New York agent and said, "Hey, I think she could do musicals."
Ewoldt began auditioning as soon as she graduated. Her first big break on Broadway was as Cosette in the 2006 revival of Les Miserables, where she played opposite another Asian American actress and her role model, Lea Salonga.
All alone, I walk with him.
She was a huge inspiration for me growing up. I got to see her play Eponine in Les Mis, and I saw her play Kim in Miss Saigon, and especially getting to see her playing Eponine. You know, here she was, a Filipino woman playing a French role and being amazing at it, and you know the audiences loved it, and the producers loved it, and it was a wonderful thing. So for me, you know, as an Asian American, it was very inspiring to get to watch somebody else, you know, pave the way.
Throughout the years, Ewoldt has also landed other non-Asian roles, such as Maria in West Side Story and Mary Bonds in A Christmas Carol. But the high-profile role of Christine in The Phantom of the Opera has put her squarely on the marquee as a groundbreaking pioneer. It was a notion that brought her to tears.
What stories are we telling our children, who are we inspiring to join the business? Sorry, it makes me like emotional somehow. But you know what I mean? Like it makes it bigger than, than just getting to play a dream role on stage.
Especially in the current climate of what is known as the whitewashing of Hollywood, where Asian roles are being filled by Caucasian actors.
It's interesting to be sort of a part of something that feels historic in its way, and I've been really moved by the response, especially like the Asian American theater community in New York has been so incredibly supportive, because they're really excited that, that things change.
But it wasn't an easy road. She says she lost count of how many times she auditioned for this coveted role. So when the call finally came, she had to pinch herself to assure herself it wasn't a dream.
I believe my reaction was something like, are you sure? Really? Really? Okay. Thanks. Are you sure? I may have questioned it a bunch of times. Well, it's certainly up there as one of the greatest soprano roles that's been written for the Broadway stage. And so it's just really exciting for me to get to play this part that really fits so well into my voice and really, speaks to the way that I like to sing and that my voice likes to sing.
In addition to Ewoldt, the show also broke new ground by casting Jordan Donica, an African-American, to play Raoul, Christine Daillet's fiancé. This is the first time an African-American has ever played that role on Broadway. I'm Minnie Roh for Asian American Life.
That's our show for now. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have a great story idea to share, we'd love to hear from you, like our Facebook page on Asian American Life. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.